All right, all right. Let's pull up a chair. Let's pull up a chair here. It's the Green Bay Packers. I think we all know this, and we all know how awful this rivalry has been for the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. Because not even that, more like 10 years. Because the Bears can't get good at all, and Green Bay has just been good. So naturally, Packers win 9 out of 10 times. So, yeah, I don't know. It all depends on who starts for each team because both teams are not really sure if their starting quarterbacks are going to start. I don't know. I haven't really been paying attention too much with the news about, with Green Bay, but I know Aaron Rodgers did leave the game against Philly. Jordan Love threw a touchdown pass to Christian Watson. That's kind of really all I know. And so, if it is Jordan Love to start, it'll be very interesting because it's going to be his first start against the Bears. And the first time that the Bears don't play Rodgers in what seems like an eternity. And so, what the Bears are going to need to do, and I'm also interested to see if Justin Fields, they give him the nod or if they decide to sit him again. But, I don't know if they decide to sit him again because it's Green Bay and they have their bye next. It's a very interesting decision because both Chicago and Green Bay are going to have their bye after this game. And as I've stated before, the Bears' schedule after the bye is absolutely brutal. They're losing all 4 of those games. Buffalo, Philadelphia, Minnesota, all 3 of those games are at home. Those are L's. And their only other game is a road game against Detroit, which they've proven not to be too much of a pushover. So who knows how that one goes. But it's interesting to see what the Bears and the Packers are both going to do and how they're going to approach this game, knowing it's their long-hated rivals. Bye weeks coming up. Both quarterbacks are questionable in terms of Fields and Rodgers. Do we see potentially Trevor Siemian versus Jordan Love? That would be really weird and very interesting to see. I don't want to see it because I know we'd lose, but I think that, it might actually be competitive because Jordan Love doesn't have very much starting experience, but he's been learning under Rodgers and LaFleur for like 3 years now. So I'm interested to see what he can do if he gets, starting time here at the end of the year. Or does Green Bay decide to start Rodgers one more game just to beat the Bears again and ruin our dreams and crush us, and then start Jordan Love for the final 4 games of the year? Or do they decide to sit Rodgers, have him recover that thumb, and then play the last 4 games of the year? Which I don't know if that's a very logical decision because Green Bay is essentially out of the playoff picture. I don't know. It's so interesting what we might be able to see here. And so, this is not. It's not just any typical Bears Packers game. Both teams are pretty much out of the playoffs. This game is, I would say, it means nothing, but there's a very important thing on the line here. The NFL, I've gone on a hunch, and I haven't really said this many times, but I am 100% sure they scheduled the Bears-Packers game in Lambeau in Week 2 to see the Packers break and claim the all-time win record against the Bears in Lambeau on prime time. Didn't happen, even though they won. Because the Bears had won and they had lost. Green Bay tied us, I think. Actually, no, they got back within 1. And I was assuming I didn't want them to lose that, and have it be there. So I was really ecstatic when they beat San Francisco, and when Green Bay lost to Minnesota, I was like, great, now they can't even tie us. But as the season's gone on longer and longer, I've been sitting here like, we've had to share this record for literally the last time we were not in possession, at least tied or in the lead for most wins all time, was like 1920 It's been over 100 years now since the Bears did not have the all-wins title. And if Green Bay ends up winning this game here, although not the way the NFL wanted it to happen or predicted it to happen, they would still break the record by beating the Bears. And as the season has gone on, I'm like, okay, maybe they've got a shot. Maybe they've got a shot to keep this record throughout the entire season somehow with the way that these two teams looked at the beginning of the year. I expected them to lose it probably around week 5, week 6. But they haven't passed them yet. They had a chance to against Tennessee in week 11 to have it for a couple days, potentially, if the Bears beat the Falcons, which they didn't. But they didn't. And they've lost to Philly again, but we're tied. I think 783 total all-time wins. It was a very important matchup because the NFL tried to schedule us for this, type of stakes in week 2. For some reason, it's still applicable in week 13. Only this time, it actually is going to be the difference. So part of this season has definitely been, as the season's gone on, and Green Bay's had their losing streak, and they've and Chicago has barely snuck by a couple wins, and they've kept this record. I've been like, okay, that was kind of like, I just want you to win a couple games here, just so that they cannot pass us, this season, because from what it looks like right now, the offseason may entail 2 total different things for these teams and could potentially be a major shift in this rivalry. Potentially. I'm not saying anything is certain, but with how each team's situation's looking, this could be the switch with Aaron Rodgers, and maybe he decides to retire. I doubt it. Tom Brady still hasn't retired. I don't think Aaron Rodgers will retire. But there is a possibility he does. It's not completely out of the question. But if he does, and with the amount of cap space that the Bears have, this could be the major shift, and the Bears could go back into dominating this rivalry for for like a decade, for the next decade, which sounds really weird. Really weird, since I've been a fan of this team for almost a full decade now. My first memory as a sports fan is the Rodgers 4th and 8 pass to Randall Cobb to win the division and knock us out of the playoffs. That is the first sports memory I have. So Rodgers has been crushing my hopes and dreams for almost a full decade now, and is literally since I became a sports fan. So it's so weird to think about. There could be this major shift where Aaron Rodgers' time in Green Bay could potentially be over this offseason. It could have been potentially over last offseason. So I think it's going to be incredibly interesting. And even if Green Bay does end up taking this record from us, do the Bears get it right back next season? There's a couple questions. And this is just hypothetical. In the grand scheme of things right now, this record doesn't really matter. But, outside of Bears and Packers fans, really. And then the NFL just, create up some storylines. It's just a good headline. But other than that, not really many people really care that much. And from what I've seen, the Bears organization isn't really caring too much either, because they want that nice, tasty top 3 pick. But honestly, it's really interesting because both these teams are essentially out of the playoffs. Detroit is in second place in this division now after they beat us both back-to-back weeks and then beat the Giants afterwards. And they played close against Buffalo, so I don't know. They may have a chance to... And they're not going to go... I don't know if they'll go to the playoffs. I mean, the NFC is kind of weak. But, if they keep winning, they could potentially make a run here. And they may be looking pretty good next year, especially if they, get a good quarterback. So, I don't know. This division is now looking really interesting because it looks like the Vikings are going to be the team to beat next year. They are the team to beat this year. They could clinch the NFC North with a win against the Jets and the Lions losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars at home. And if Minnesota wins and Detroit wins, they match up against each other the next week in Week 14. So there you go. This division will be decided by the end of Week 14 or 15. This division was decided in Week 5. It's just a matter of formality at this point. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what the Bears can do to see if they can compete with the Vikings and to see if Detroit makes any moves that will end up making them have a potential fight for the playoffs. And it's so weird to say that Green Bay may actually have the worst situation out of the 4 teams in this division. Again, it's a might. Please, if you are a Packers fan watching this, do not assume I'm just ratting on your team right now. I have no place to speak about ratting on your team. I'm speaking about this, trying to be as objective as possible. If you find it not as subjective, that's how you see it. But it's just really interesting, and I think just sitting down and just talking about this for about 5-6 minutes, just kind of talk about it, get some thoughts in. That'd be something. I might make this a separate video considering how long this has gone. But I think that this is a very intriguing matchup, and I'm very excited for it. I'm going to try and do my best to not keep my hopes up. Try my best, my very, very best to not let myself get heartbroken again for like the 50 billionth time by this team. So, I don't know. It's a very interesting situation. And I don't know how many people are really going to be talking about it. But, these games have been pretty bad for the better part of a decade now. Very rarely have we seen a Bears-Packers game in the last 10 years that has been, show-stopping. And not only that, but has meant a lot. Like, the Bears-Packers 2013 game in Week 17 has been the game between these two teams that has meant the most in the last 10 years, I'd say. Because there really isn't too much else. I mean, the Bears' biggest, knock on the Packers in this past decade was spoiling Brett Favre's retirement ceremony in 2015. And the NFL likes to forget about that game. They really do. I've seen a lot of things, when it comes to this. They start posting about a bunch of highlights about, like, this storied rivalry. No mention of the Thanksgiving game in 2015 where the Bears spoiled Brett Favre's retirement ceremony. But they'll talk about the 2018 game where Rodgers came back. They'll talk about, those other games that, didn't, in the grand scheme of things, didn't really mean too much. But that 2018 game is probably the game that's been the best between these two teams in the last 5 years. You go back to 2017. And, it's really frustrating because 2018 was the last time we beat Green Bay. And that was to knock them out of the playoffs in their 100th season. Packers did the exact same thing to us the very next year in Week 15 in Lambeau, knocked us out of the playoffs. But these last 2 years have been just so boring. Packers dominate at home on prime time. Bears get embarrassed. It's, I've seen so many complaints about this. It's like, we have to watch them again. The only people who really enjoy it now are Green Bay Packer fans. Because, we've been doing it for, I don't know, like 7-8 years straight, minus 2019. Every game in Lambeau's been under the lights and in prime time. I've mentioned this a couple times, but I don't know. It's just something that's kind of been on my mind, especially when it comes to this rivalry. Like, I've mentioned it again. I've mentioned this before. I'd love to see him play a day game in Lambeau again, because that was nice in 2019. It almost felt like it wasn't even a Bears-Packers game. It felt like, I don't know. I'd like to see, Bears and Packers play under the lights in Soldier Field again, because that was a kind of a nice, different, change of pace. But, I'm not the one that makes the schedule. I probably never will be. And I don't know. But I think I've said my piece about this upcoming game. I probably will make this in a separate video. You'll know, obviously. But yeah, I am very nervous for this game against Green Bay. But there's a lot of things up in the air. Who starts at quarterback? That's the biggest question coming into this game. And does Green Bay finally take over Chicago and another category in the all-time wins category? Well, we're going to have to find out. It's this weekend, and that's the decider. So, yeah. So anyways, I think I've said my piece. Green Bay is next week. Again, one of the biggest games in the calendar, no matter how good Green Bay is, no matter how bad Chicago is, always one of the biggest games on the calendar for Bears and Packers fans. This one is in our house. Can the Bears defend the all-time win record, or will, for the first time in over a century, will they give it up? They're going to have to play it, and they're going to have to do it themselves. It all comes down to the players. We can't control anything. It's the most frustrating part about sports sometimes, isn't it? But anyways, that's it for me. If you liked it, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care.